Alright, so our primary goal in this lesson is to go ahead and take what we've learned about functions and arrays and start to replace in our index.php, well no, not our index.php file, excuse me, in our include header.inc.php file, is to go ahead and replace this menu that's in here with a function to allow it to be dynamically created. So in order to do that, to get started, what we want to do is we want to actually create the data that we're going to use to make our menu with. And this data later will come out of a database, but for now we're going to go ahead and use it to help us position ourselves to have that data that we need. And in order to make that data, it's a good idea, especially in PHP sites, because of the way that we can include files and use them to actually keep that information as separate information so that we can use it in many places without worrying about having one place to store it. And so we're going to go ahead and include, and we're going to say new file, and we're going to create the menu.data.php file. And we'll open it up, and we can see by default Dreamweaver, it's not my favorite thing about, one of the things I don't like about it is that it just automatically thinks by default it's going to create a HTML file, and that becomes a little frustrating sometimes, but that's okay. In our PHP file, what we want to create is an array with a second level array. In this first level array, what we're doing is we're saying that we're going to have pages. And what these pages are is basically those top links that we are using in our website that we're accustomed to seeing up top here. We'll go to localhost and we'll take a look at our 2x, and we can see we have love who challenges you. And at the moment, the way that these are being drawn out is if we go into our header file, we can see that we have this long nav of unordered list being drawn and nested unordered lists being drawn inside of our nav. And if we were to take that away and save it, we would see that we would lose our menu. And so now that we've lost our menu, I'm going to go ahead and bring it back for right now, just so that we can appreciate all this code we will replace with just a couple lines of code. And so if I go back out here and I take another look, we should have our menu back, which we do, and we can see that it's there. One of the things that we can see is that these are hard linking to love.php and who.php, challenges.php, and you.php. And that's what we're after in this lesson, is just to replace those 4 pages, and then we'll take care of the nested pages at a later time. So I've created my array inside my menu.data.php file, and it's a multi-dimensional array. It's 2 levels, and we can see that the first level is actually just 1. It's pages, and then inside that we've created a menu link, and we've created a menu name. And what we can do with this now is we can actually just leverage this array to continue to build our menu, and we'll extrapolate on this array as we move forward. One of the things I want to point out here, and by the way, this is an associative array, meaning, right, we have keys that we can use. They're not indexes. It makes it a lot more user-friendly for programmers to read and see what's going on. And if you notice, when we're inside the array, the last item does not have a comma. That's a place that people, especially myself, would end up getting hung up on quite frequently. When I first started writing arrays, I would put a comma there and end up with an error, because when you put the comma there, it's telling PHP to look for another element, another object in there. So we've got the menuItems array. I would encourage you to pause and type this out and get it out there so that you can complete that step before we move on to our next step. Our next step is now functions. We should be aware of what a function is by this point and how they're used. And one of the things in PHP is we want to take our functions and we want to create a new file in our include, and we'll call this one functions.include.php. And the big thing about creating a functions file separately and a menu data file separately is it will allow us, as you'll see, to call that and use it in different parts of the website, the application, and it's not tied to one specific thing, which is very useful, especially as your site grows and end up adding more. What's really cool is that inside this function.php file, we can go ahead and we can create a function to build our menu, and that is our, go ahead and put our first function in here. We're going to call that menuBuilder. And of course I'm going to copy and paste to avoid errors and making the video too long, and you're always welcome to go ahead and pause and catch up on the code. We're going to call our function menuBuilder, and we're going to set it up with a parameter to be passed inside of the function, so we can actually send variable data in to the function and it can be used inside of the function. When we call this function, the first thing we want it to do is to go ahead and create an unordered list, or begin an unordered list, because if we look, what we're doing is we're building this menu and we're going to tuck it away inside the nav. We could take it a step further and move the nav tags out as well, and we might do that in the future, but for now what we want to do is we just want to create this list. And we can see in this list we have the opening UL and then the list items, and inside the list items we have the reference, the href, which is the menu link, and then the title, the content that we want inside that to be displayed up in the navigation itself. And so if we go into our menuBuilder function, what we do is we actually echo out our first UL. We know we're going to loop through that menu data object, and then we want to close it. We're just doing a top level link at this moment, just the top 4. Love who challenges you. Therefore, all we have to do in here is put our menu items, our top menu items, which are 4 at this point. As we can see, they are the love who challenges you. And when we pass this in, what we're passing in is the menu items itself. As you'll see when we go into the header to call the function, you'll see all we're doing is essentially passing in the menu items. Those menu items get passed in, and now they are viewed as the object variable, and we pass that into the for each. Later we'll learn how to check and make sure it is an array before we pass it into the for each. For each is meant just for arrays, and we're saying for each item in it, what we would like you to do is give us the key and value. And we don't necessarily need the key yet, but we'll use it later. What we're going to use is the value. And so what will happen is this will iterate 4 times over the menu data, and the value will actually be the array itself, which allows us, as we learn, to access multi-dimensional arrays. Basically, value represents the second level array, and then we're actually using the keys to call out the values in each item as it iterates over each item. Once it's done iterating over the items, we'll echo out the closing UL tag, and then we'll close the function off. So at this point, we can save this. And the nice thing is we can use this because of how simple we've kept it. It's not just for the top menu. We will actually use this function for other menus in the footer and throughout the site as well as we progress through developing this site. Alright, so at this point we don't need the functions, and it's a good idea to go ahead and just close it, and we don't need the menu because of the fact that we've got that done, and sometimes it's just good to close it and not have to worry about accidentally putting lazy fingers in there and causing things to end up in error. So our next step will begin in the top of the document, actually. And the reason it's going to begin in the top of the document is because what we want to do before anything else, script reads top to bottom. And because it reads top to bottom, the first thing we want to do is bring in that menu data file, because we want that data available. It's not dependent on anything else, it's just a piece of information. And then we want to bring in the functions. So those functions and the data will be available all down through not only this page, but this page is normally called, if we're in the header.inc.php page, this page is normally called in at the top of almost every document. If you can recall, if we go and we just look at index, we can see it's there. And as we move through other pages, we can see that as well. That's just a little Dreamweaver silly thing. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we're pulling in that menu data. And because we're relative in PHP, because we're calling in the header.inc.php from the include folder, we actually can just do a relative path to where the file sits that we're looking to pull in. And in this case, it actually sits right here inside the include folder, which means it already sees the menu.data.php. We're going to do a require once on both of these, actually, and I'll touch on that right now for both of them. The reason we're doing require once is, first of all, we need these files. Without these files, without this information, our application will not run properly, and therefore we actually prefer that it just stop running rather than continue running and present a user without any kind of information, without a menu, without a way to navigate through the site. So using require is very important in this case rather than include, because include, if these were not available, it would still allow the script to run down through, and we don't want that. We would just want the page at this point to just stop working. We put the menu data over top the functions because there's dependencies for that data over top the functions. And we use the once, by the way, because we do not, as we've learned in our lessons, if we actually require functions over and over and over again, we are wasting resources and it can just keep building up. In this case, it would just keep overwriting everything, and we would end up with overusing resources for no reason whatsoever. Same with functions. So now that we have called both of these in, sometimes it's a good idea. We created our functions, right? We created our menu data, and you can see if you're using Dreamweaver, one of the nice things is because we're in the header include and it's saying require or include, Dreamweaver will actually just put these up here for you so that you can navigate to those files without opening them. We have that open. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to take a peek out here at our local host. We're in our local host in our folder. And we're going to empty cache and just do a refresh. Nothing's erroring out. Everything's working as we would expect it to. We know we have those hard links in there, and we're good to go. So at this point is when we go ahead and take all that work starts to pay off for us. And what I mean by how all that work starts to pay off for us is that we can slowly start to reduce code, increase efficiency, and add a level of dynamics that will allow us to dynamically draw this out. As we move forward and we learn how to pull this out of the database, we can allow users to control the navigation rather than us. Those of you familiar with WordPress, there's actually under the settings, there's a place to go and change menus and create menus and title them and things such as that. This is the starting point of doing something such as that. So rather than try to select everything in the window and get it all right, one of the nice things you can do in most IDEs is we can go ahead and we can collapse that nav, as you can see in here. I'll put some space down here so we can bring it up a little. And I have the opening and close nav in there, plus everything that's inside of it. And I've actually copied the nav with the PHP in it, and I'll just overwrite it. I'll go ahead and clean it up because clean code is the best code. And before I save that, actually, what I want to do is I'm going to cut that back out real quick. I'm going to hit save. And let's go ahead and just confirm that we're making changes, everything else is working, no errors, nothing's going on. We dropped the nav. It's always nice sometimes to just go ahead and check things out and see where you're at with things. And it's also good to take things out and be able to see the absent code to be able to appreciate what it is you're doing. So I'll go ahead in here and I'm going to paste that back in. And all I've done is, in the end, is removed all the content between the opening and closed nav tag. I've put in the PHP echo. I'm calling the menuBuilder, and I'm calling the menuItems array and passing it into the menuBuilder, which means, again, that comes in, that becomes object. It is an array, therefore a for each can easily loop through that array and create those LIs in between these two UL items. So if I got everything right in my code, I should be able to hit save. Go out to my local host again, empty cache, and I've essentially recreated that top layer. Now we've lost the bottom layer, and that's not a concern to us because we still have everything that we need inside our site, and we'll slowly, actually, you'll find eventually we'll narrow our way down to just an index.php page. And we have all the information and resources that we need in each one of these pages. And so for now, it's best to break these lessons up in a way that we can get through them and they make sense for you. And so we're just starting with the top level. So that wraps this up. I'll see you in the next video where we will merge to master and push to production.